There is a version of your life that already exists. Not someday, not as a reward for enough effort. Right now, existing, complete. And the reason you cannot reach it has nothing to do with worthiness, timing, or luck. It has to do with one thing. And that one thing is what this video is about. Robert Collier documented this principle in 1926. He called it the most misunderstood idea in all of human experience. Not because it is complicated, because it requires looking at something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Stay with me, because what comes next is going to reframe everything you have tried. You have visualized the life you want. You know exactly what it looks like. You have felt what it would feel like, the specific quality of it, the ease of it, the particular version of yourself that lives inside it. And somewhere in the middle of that visualization, a thought surfaces. Quiet, familiar, the thought that says, what if I am just someone this does not happen for? You push it down, but it already happened, the doubt already got in. And you have been in that cycle. Visualizing, doubting, starting over, for longer than you would admit to most people. That cycle is not a personal failure. It is the predictable result of trying to reach something from the wrong starting point. And the starting point is everything. Here is what Collier documented about why that cycle happens. Most people believe the life they want is something they have to build, step by step, earned through sufficient effort over sufficient time. And so they work, they improve, they make progress, and then they look up after months or years of genuine effort and realize the life they wanted still feels approximately as far away as when they started. Not because they failed, because they were operating from a fundamental misunderstanding of how the life they want actually comes into existence. Collier wrote that the man who tries to build the life he wants has misunderstood the process entirely. You do not build it, you step into it. And the difference between those two things is the difference between spending years constructing something that keeps collapsing and finding yourself already inside it, wondering when the shift happened. The source I am drawing from today, Collier's original work, is in the description. Free, but stay. Because what comes next is the part that changes how you understand everything you have been trying to do. Here is the principle. Everything you can genuinely imagine already exists, not as a future possibility, as a current reality, in a state that your current consciousness does not have access to yet. Before you dismiss this, before the part of your mind that has heard variations of this and found them vague decides this is more of the same, hear the mechanism. Because Collier was not making a spiritual claim. He was describing something precise. He wrote that every reality a man can conceive exists as completely as the reality he currently inhabits. The only question is which one his consciousness is tuned to receive. Tuned to receive, not attract, not create, not manifest through effort. Receive, like a radio. A radio does not create the music. The music exists, available to any receiver, and the radio, depending on its frequency, receives some of it and is deaf to the rest. Your consciousness works the same way. The life you want exists. It is available right now. And your current state of consciousness is determining whether you can receive it, or whether it remains completely invisible to you. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanism Collier spent years documenting, and understanding it changes what you need to do next. Because if the life you want already exists and only needs to be received, not built, not earned, not constructed piece by piece, then the question is not how to work harder toward it. The question is what is preventing the reception. And the answer to that question is the most useful thing anyone has ever told you about why your manifestation has not produced what you expected. What prevents the reception is the baseline assumption, not your mood, not your beliefs, not how positive you feel on a given morning. The baseline assumption, the thing your nervous system treats as simply true about you and what is available to you. Not because you chose it, but because it has been confirmed so many times over so many years that it no longer feels like an assumption. It feels like the texture of reality itself. That baseline is the frequency, and the frequency determines what you can receive. Collier wrote that two men can stand in the same room looking at the same opportunity. One sees it immediately, the other does not see it at all. Not because one is smarter, because one's baseline assumption includes that kind of opportunity as part of his accessible reality, and the other's does not. The opportunity exists for both. It is available to both. But only one has a frequency capable of receiving it. This is why people can be surrounded by the same circumstances and have completely different lives. The circumstances are the same, the frequency is different. And frequency determines access. Not effort, not intelligence, not worthiness, frequency. If you are finding this useful, hit the like. It tells me this is reaching the right people. Now stay, because what comes next is the part most people never hear explained accurately. The baseline assumption does not form through reasoning. It forms through repetition, through the accumulation of experiences that confirm a particular version of who you are and what is available to you, until that version stops feeling like a version and starts feeling like truth. And this is why trying to change it through affirmations and visualizations alone rarely works. You cannot change the baseline by adding new thoughts on top of it. The baseline operates underneath those thoughts, broadcasting unchanged, while you repeat the affirmations above it. Like painting over a wall without treating the damp underneath. The new paint goes on. The damp keeps coming through. The only way to change the baseline is to see it, to recognize it as assumption rather than fact. To hold, even for a moment, the genuine possibility that what feels like the texture of reality might be one frequency's version of reality, one version among many, all real, all present, all accessible to the consciousness that is tuned to receive them. Before I go further, something in the description. What Collier documented about how to shift the baseline specifically, the precise internal moves that change the frequency, goes 7 volumes deep. The complete framework is in the original, free, in the description. If what you are hearing is making something click that you could not previously articulate, that link is where it continues. Now, the shift itself. The shift does not feel like a breakthrough. This is the part nobody describes accurately, and not describing it accurately is why most people miss it when it happens or mistake something else for it. The shift does not feel like sudden certainty. It does not feel like a wave of emotion or a dramatic moment of clarity. It feels like relief, a specific, quiet, almost unremarkable relief. The relief of someone who has been holding something very tightly and finally, not because they decided to, not because they forced themselves to, simply lets go. And in that letting go, in that release of the grip on the current state as the only real state, something changes. Not in the external world, not yet. In the internal one, the frequency shifts, and the person who moments before could not imagine inhabiting the reality they wanted, suddenly finds it not only imaginable but somehow already present, as if it had always been there, just outside the range of their previous frequency, and now within it. Collier called this the moment of reception. He wrote that the man does not create the new reality in this moment. He simply becomes capable of receiving what was always being broadcast. And once received, once the frequency has shifted and the new reality has been accessed, the external world begins to reorganize, not because something magical happens, because the broadcast changed, and the exterior reality, which is always a reflection of the broadcast, begins to reflect the new frequency with the same faithfulness with which it had reflected the old one. If this is describing something you have felt but never had words for, leave a word below. Just one word. What the life you want feels like when you imagine it clearly. I want to know what this is reaching. Here is the piece that determines whether the shift produces results or dissolves back into the old pattern. The external shift always lags behind the internal one, always. Matter is dense. It reorganizes slowly. Consciousness shifts instantly. And in the gap, in the period between the internal frequency shifting and the external world catching up, most people conclude the shift did not happen. They look at their circumstances. They see the old pattern. They interpret that as evidence that nothing changed, and they return to the old frequency. Collier wrote about this gap with particular care. He said it is the most dangerous period in the entire process, not because it is painful, because it looks like failure. And the person who does not understand that they are looking at lag, not failure, releases the new frequency, returns to the old one, and the external world, which was already beginning to reorganize, stabilizes back into the old pattern. They were inside the lag, one step from the world catching up, and they stepped back. Here is what to do in the lag, nothing different. The shift has happened, the frequency has changed. The external world is reorganizing. The only task is to maintain the new frequency. Not through effort, not through forcing yourself to believe, not through looking for evidence, but by continuing to operate from the new state, as if it were already your normal, as if the old state were the one that now felt foreign, because it is. The moment the shift happens, the old state is the foreign one, the new one is home. And home does not require maintenance. It only requires that you stop insisting on returning to a place you have already left. If this channel is showing you what the original principles actually said, before they were simplified, subscribe. Every few days we go deeper into what was documented 100 years ago. The precision that was taken out, the mechanisms that were left behind. The complete picture is this: the life you want already exists. This is not a motivational statement. It is a description of how consciousness and reality relate to each other. Every reality you can genuinely conceive exists as a current, present reality, available to the consciousness that is tuned to receive it. You have been trying to build what you only needed to access. You have been creating effort where only a frequency shift was needed. You have been treating your current state as reality, when it is only your current frequency's version of reality. One version among infinite versions, all real, all present, all accessible, to the consciousness that releases its grip on the current state as the only state. The shift does not require years. It does not require the right circumstances or permission from anything outside you. It requires the release of one specific thing: the certainty that your current reality is more real than your desired one. Release that certainty, even briefly, even tentatively, even with doubt still present, and the frequency begins to shift. The new reality begins to come into range. And when it does, what follows is not luck. It is the external world doing what it has always done, reflecting the frequency it is receiving from you, as it always has, as it always will. The link in the description goes to the original source. 7 volumes, not a summary, not a course about this principle. The original, free, in the description. If you close without going there, you will have understood the principle today. But understanding and experiencing are different things. The methodology that produces the experience is in the original. It costs nothing, and it is the difference between knowing this and living inside it. The link is below. The life you want already exists. It has always existed. It has been available every single day of every year you spent trying to build it. You were not failing. You were operating at the wrong frequency. And frequency, unlike circumstances, unlike luck, unlike timing, is the one thing that has always been yours to change. Right now, the question is not whether it is possible. The question is whether you are willing to release the certainty that what you currently have access to is all that exists. Because the moment you release it, even slightly, the rest takes care of itself. The original documentation of how it actually works is in the description, waiting. Here is something worth sitting with. You have probably heard the phrase, "the life you want already exists," before, in some form, from some teacher or video or book, and you heard it, and it resonated, and then nothing changed. And the reason nothing changed is not that the principle is wrong. It is that hearing a principle and understanding its mechanism are two completely different things. Most people hear this idea at the level of inspiration. They feel it as a possibility, something that gives them a momentary sense of expansion, and then the baseline reasserts itself. The old frequency returns, and the inspiration fades. What Collier documented was not the inspiration. It was the mechanism underneath the inspiration. The specific reason why the idea is true, and the specific reason why knowing it is true, is not enough to change anything, because the baseline does not respond to inspiration. It responds to something much more precise. Think about what it actually feels like to operate from the wrong frequency. It feels like trying, constantly, like there is always a gap between where you are and where you want to be, and the effort to close that gap is continuous and exhausting. And never quite sufficient. It feels like pushing, like the life you want is something that has to be earned, piece by piece, through enough of the right actions. And sometimes those actions produce results, and then something contracts them, and you find yourself back at the same level you started, wondering what you did wrong. This is not a description of failure. It is a precise description of operating from a frequency that cannot receive what you are reaching for, because receiving and reaching are opposite movements. Reaching assumes the thing is distant and must be brought closer. Receiving assumes the thing is present and only needs to be accessed. And your body knows the difference between those two states even when your mind does not. Reaching is tense, receiving is open. Reaching narrows, receiving expands. And the frequency that allows reception is the open, expanded one, not the tense, reaching one. This is why Collier's approach was different from almost everything else written in his era. He was not teaching people to want more intensely. He was not teaching them to believe more forcefully. He was teaching them to stop doing the thing that was making the desired reality invisible to them. And that thing, the thing that makes the desired reality invisible, is the baseline assumption that it is not yet available, that it has to be reached for, worked toward, earned. That certainty, the certainty of its unavailability, is the frequency that prevents reception. And releasing that certainty, even slightly, is the move that changes everything. What does it actually mean to release that certainty? It does not mean convincing yourself of something you do not believe. It does not mean performing confidence you do not feel. It does not mean pretending your current circumstances are different from what they are. It means holding open, genuinely, not performatively, the possibility that your current circumstances are not the measure of what is available to you, that they are the reflection of a previous frequency, a readout of a previous state, not a verdict on what you can access going forward. And holding that possibility open is different from believing it. You do not have to believe the life you want is available. You only have to stop being certain that it is not. The gap between certainty that it is unavailable and genuine openness about whether it is. That gap is where the frequency begins to shift. Collier spent considerable time on this distinction because he had watched people misapply the principle in a specific way. They would hear that the desired reality already exists, and they would try to feel certain of it. They would try to generate the feeling of certainty through repetition and visualization. And they would find that the certainty felt forced, performed, hollow. Because you cannot manufacture certainty about something your baseline does not yet accept. The frequency shift does not come from generating certainty about the new state. It comes from releasing certainty about the old one. That is a smaller and more honest move. And it is the move that actually works. Not because of philosophy, because of how the nervous system functions. The nervous system cannot be convinced into a new state by force, but it can be opened to one by the removal of what was closing it. Here is a way to think about what that opening actually produces in practice. When the frequency begins to shift, when the grip on the old certainty loosens even slightly, something changes in how the world appears to you. Not in what the world contains, in what you notice within it. Opportunities that were always present begin to register. Conversations that would have passed you by become significant. Decisions that previously felt unavailable begin to feel within reach. Not because the world changed, because what you are capable of receiving from the world changed. Your attention reorganizes around the new frequency, the way a radio reorganizes around a new station. The same air contains all the stations simultaneously. What changes is what the receiver is tuned to pick up. And when the receiver shifts, when the baseline assumption loosens enough for a different frequency to come through, the world that was always there begins to appear differently. As if it were new, as if things were finally moving in your direction, when in fact, the things were always there. You simply became capable of receiving them. This is what those massive life shifts look like from the inside. Not a dramatic moment of breakthrough, not a single decision that changes everything. A quiet shift in what the person can receive, followed by a period of reorganization, followed by an external world that begins to reflect the new frequency. The speed of it surprises people every time, because they expected it to take years, because they had been operating on the assumption that building takes time. And it does, but reception does not take time. Reception happens the moment the frequency matches, and the frequency can match in a single moment of genuine release. The practical question is how to produce that release when the baseline has been operating for years. Collier was precise about this. He said, the release does not come from effort directed at the new state. It comes from honest examination of the old one, specifically from asking the question, what am I currently certain of that I have never actually verified? Not from a place of self-criticism, from a place of genuine curiosity. Because most of what the baseline treats as certain fact has never been verified. It was absorbed through experience, through repetition, through the slow accumulation of a particular version of reality, becoming familiar enough to feel inevitable. And the moment you look at it directly, the moment you bring it from the level of unexamined certainty into the light of conscious questioning, its hold loosens. Not completely, not immediately, but enough. Enough for the frequency to begin to shift. Enough for a different version of what is available to begin to come through. Collier called this honest examination the first and most important act in the entire process. Not visualization, not affirmation, not the generation of positive emotion. Honest examination of what you are currently certain of that may never have been verified, because the baseline does not fear positive emotion. It absorbs positive emotion and continues broadcasting unchanged. What it cannot withstand is genuine examination, because examination is the one thing that reveals assumption as assumption rather than fact. And an assumption recognized as assumption has already lost its power to limit. The link in the description takes you to the original documentation. 7 volumes. The complete methodology for this examination is in the original. The specific questions, the specific sequence, the specific way of working with what comes up is in the original. Not in a course about the original. In the original. Free in the description. If what you heard today opens something, a question, a recognition, a sense that you have been operating from the wrong starting point, that link is where the opening continues. The life you want already exists. You do not have to build it. You only have to shift into a frequency capable of receiving it. And that shift begins with a single honest question. Not an affirmation, not a decision, a question. What am I currently certain of that I have never actually verified? Hold that question. Let it sit. Do not rush to answer it. Because the answer is not what matters. What matters is the holding, the genuine openness that the question creates. Because that openness is the beginning of the shift. Collier documented this in 1926. The complete documentation is in the description. Free, waiting.